Assalamualaikum everyone, welcome back to my channel. In my previous video, I have given you the introduction of literature, and in today's lecture, I am going to tell you about different genres of literature. So, overall, we will be dealing with introduction of genre, and we will see how many genres of literature are there, and we will also see the types of those genres. So, what is genre? Have you ever heard the word genre? And have you ever heard that someone has asked you what sort of movies do you like, and you reply with, "Oh, I like thriller movies, or I like action movies, or I like animated movies." What are these action movies, thriller movies, and animated movies? These are basically genres. Genre is a broader term that can be used for any sort of art. That can be used for the music. That can be used for novels, dramas, and etc. So, genre refers to any work that shares certain characteristics. But if we deal with genres of literature, we can say that genre of literature, these are specific kind or style of writing. Basically, there are three genres of literature: poetry, drama, and prose. In today's video, we will be only discussing about poetry and its subtypes. So let's move toward that. What is poetry? Poetry basically it is spontaneous overflow of emotion, and it is oldest form of literature. When there was writing was not invented, still people used to express the feelings in the form of poetry. Poetry is that genre of literature that evokes emotional response from the reader, and the writer writes the poetry in such a way that there is rhythm and rhyme, and it is beautifully written. That rhyme can be at the end, or it can be in the middle, and rhythm is there is proper order in his poetry. Do remember that poetry can be fiction or non-fiction. I mean, you can write on the real events, and you can also express your imagination, but it is not like narrative poetry. I have given you the example of poetry that is my own, that I have written during this quarantine time. But though I'm not really a good writer, but still you can see that there is proper rhyme in it: quarantine, wine, coins behind, mine behind, seaside, roadside, etc. So let's move towards its kinds. The very first kind of poetry is lyric poetry. Lyric poetry, it is that poetry that is non-narrative, and it is it is in this poetry the mood is melodic and emotional. Poet is gloomy throughout in his poetry, and the writer uses his words to express his own feelings and his own emotions. Do remember that a lyric is a non-narrative poem. I mean, this is not like a story. And there is, it features a single speaker whose purpose is to share the state of mind, a mood, or attitude of his, or attitude to his reader. And the important thing about lyric poetry is that it is accompanied by music. Next is kinds of lyric poetry. So there are three kinds of lyric poetry. First is elegy, second is ode, third is sonnet. Elegy is basically that lyric poem in which the writer mourns over someone's death. In Urdu, we call it marsiya. So, what happens that writer expresses feelings of grief and melancholy, and the theme in this lyric poetry is, or this lyric poem is death. For example, in memory of W.B. Yeats was written by W.H. Auden in which he has written, or he has mourned over the death of W.B. Yeats. Another example of O Captain, My Captain by Walt Whitman. Second is ode. What is ode? Ode is, it is a long poem, and it expresses a strong feeling of love or respect for someone or something. Uh, there are following examples: Ode on Imitation of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood by William Wordsworth, Ode on Creation by John Keats, and there was another ode written by John Keats was Ode on a nightingale. Next is sonnet. In Urdu, we call it ghazal. So, sonnet is a poem of 14 lines that use any of a number of formal rhyme schemes, and in English they are typically 10, typically 10 syllables per line, which we call iambic pentameter. So, there is a fixed rhyme scheme in it. What are the examples? Let's have a look. Visions by Francisco Petrarch and Sonnet 1 by William Shakespeare. Next is narrative poetry. So narrative poetry is basically that type of poetry in which there is narration of a story. Name itself is suggesting that it tells us a story, and a narrative poem does not need a rhyming pattern. There are some kinds of narrative poetry. The very first one is epic poetry. Epic poetry, it is that kind of narrative poetry in which the writer has written about someone's heroic deeds, and he can also express the valorous deed of someone who was heroic in the past. So the very fine example of epic poem is Beowulf, that was, I guess, written in Anglo-Saxon period. I mean, that was written in classical period or Anglo-Saxon, I don't remember, I'm sorry. Next one is mock epic. Mock epic is that kind of narrative poetry in which writer usually mock on the stereotypes of stereotypes of heroes or heroic literature. I mean, the literature that was written as that was epic poetry. The writers in this kind of narrative poetry are now mocking that. The very fine example of mock epic is Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock. Third one is ballad. What is ballad? Ballad is a narrative poetry, and is kind of dramatic. So what happens here, that in ballads the writer tells the story about hardships, tragedies, love and romance, etc. And the very fine example of ballad is The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. Next is dramatic monologue. What are dramatic monologue? As the name itself suggests, that is monologue, that there is one speaker only. So in dramatic monologue, there is only one speaker that is involved in the poem, and his aim is to get the reader to understand the personality and state of the mind of speaker. And when the reader, he understands the state of mind of speaker, he sympathizes with them. He can put himself into the writer's shoes. So very fine examples of dramatic monologues are the poems written by Alfred Tennyson, Robert Browning, and T.S. Eliot. So that's all about the poetry and its kinds. If you really like my videos, kindly subscribe to my channel and don't forget to press the bell icon. See you soon.